This is CBC Late Night News.
Good evening, I'm Marivelle Tarouk. Police are still hunting for suspects after a shooting in Rexdale that left one man dead and another injured. It happened in the area of John Garland Boulevard and Pendleton Drive just before 2 this afternoon. As police continue to investigate, residents in the neighborhood say they're rattled but not surprised. Kelda Yoon reports.
The winds were reaching their peak when Toronto police were called to 18 John Garland Boulevard for the sound of gunshots.
It happened down the street somewhere, but I don't know exactly where on the street.
One man was rushed to Sunnybrook without vital signs and pronounced dead shortly after. Another remains in serious but non-life-threatening condition. Their identities have not yet been released.
The homicide unit has now taken over the case. Now officers are in the neighborhood canvassing, speaking to those who were home at the time of the shooting. They are particularly interested in residents who may have surveillance video.
Ruhi Gill moved to the neighborhood just 2 months ago.
Yeah, we were just downstairs and we didn't hear anything. I came out and it was police everywhere. We didn't hear anything.
But she's also not shocked.
We have been warned. We have heard that it's the most unsafe area around here. So we knew about it.
Another neighbor feels the same.
It's Toronto. It happens every day.
But while police say they don't yet have any suspects, they also say
The neighborhood's safe right now. As you can see, there's many officers on scene, and I don't think there's a reason for the neighbors at this time to feel any kind of need for their safety.
it's not yet known whether the shooting was targeted. It is the 10th homicide in the city so far this year. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
A Mississauga man is recovering in hospital after he was wounded in a shooting in Brampton late last night. Peel police say they were called to Torbram Road and Steeles Avenue around 11:30 p.m. They say a man had been driving his car in the area when another vehicle approached and an unknown person in that vehicle shot at him. The man who was injured pulled over and went to a nearby Tim Hortons coffee shop where he called police. He was taken to a trauma center in life-threatening condition. This morning, he was upgraded to non-life-threatening. Police are asking any witnesses to come forward. An elderly woman has died after a serious collision in Whitby. Officers were called to Highway 7, also known as Winchester Road, in the community of Brooklyn around 11 o'clock this morning after a minivan and sedan collided. The 77-year-old woman who was behind the wheel of the sedan was transported to hospital where she was later pronounced dead. Ottawa police say a 43-year-old man has been charged with second-degree murder after another man was found badly beaten at a Vanier home.
He used to come here for coffee every morning, and we'd sit and chat for a bit. He's a nice guy. He'd help anybody, you know. Like, he had a beautiful heart. It's unfortunate what happened to him.
55-year-old Gaëtan Jolin was found severely injured at a residence on Joliet Avenue on Wednesday. Jolin was taken to hospital and later died there from his injuries. Michael Leduc was arrested Saturday and appeared in court this morning. Police say Leduc and Jolin knew each other. An Ontario family is urging the federal government's intervention to secure the safety of a loved one it says is detained in Egypt. The family says he was seized this week, and their worries are made worse by Egypt's controversial human rights record. CBC's Natalie Nanowski reports.
Are you done or still not yet? Yes, sir. And then that's the last we've ever heard from him.
That WhatsApp conversation was a week ago. Amal Abbas and her family were trying to comfort her father, who was being questioned by airport security in Cairo.
An officer told him that your name was flagged. The last message we heard from him was around 10 p.m., our time here, letting us know that he loves us. He later sent a message to one of his friends in Egypt who told us that he was taken by state security.
Yasser Ahmed Albaz has an engineering company in Oakville, just outside of Toronto. He went to Egypt in December for work.
My father has no political affiliations. He is not active politically. He is known here in the community for his charity work and community involvement. So, of course, everyone is very concerned.
Amal Abbas says her family immediately contacted Global Affairs, and her father was given a lawyer. Yesterday, she learned he was transferred to Tora Prison in Cairo, renowned for brutality and harsh living conditions. Canadian Tarek Lubani spent 50 days there in 2013 after he was arrested for helping the wounded during one of the many protests in Egypt.
When we first arrived to Tora, we were greeted to what's referred to as Haflet al-Istiqbal, or the welcoming party. That was an 8-hour beating and torture session.
Lubani credits media attention and the Canadian government's swift action for getting him out alive. He hopes Albaz is released before Egyptian authorities can lay charges.
It's pretty obvious that thin and flimsy evidence is still being used to try to pick up people and ruin their lives.
Global Affairs says it's in contact with Egyptian authorities, but can't say much else because of the Privacy Act.
You know, we prepared the house, we prepared everything for him, and we're just sitting here, you know, terrified for his safety.
Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Oakville, Ontario.
Well, so far it seems like the GTA has been spared by any major damage from the storm, but southwestern Ontario is certainly feeling the brunt of those winter winds. This was the scene in Fort Erie today as strong winds pushed large chunks of ice over the retaining wall from the lake. Power outages and storm damage were reported throughout the Niagara region, including a building in Welland that partially collapsed due to the weather. And if that wasn't enough, a downed tree and flooding caused problems for residents in Port Colborne. Powerful winds whipped through the area, packing gusts of up to 100 kilometers an hour. Thankfully, no one was hurt by the falling tree. Hydro One says they have been helping more than 35,000 customers in Ontario get their power back today. Certainly something that Sophia warned us about in her forecasts this weekend. So checking in on that, did it really materialize into what we were expecting, Sophia?
It could still continue as well. Nearly 90-kilometer-an-hour gusts reported at downtown Toronto as far as the peak gusts over the last 24 hours. Wind warnings still blanket much of southern Ontario. Tens of thousands were without power at the peak. We had reports of a water rescue in the Niagara region. Certainly impactful on the north and eastern portions of any of the Great Lakes. I'll talk a little bit more about wave heights when we come back in a few minutes. Let's talk about the snow for a moment, because that coupled with the wind could still pose very problematic for your Monday morning commute. Blowing snow advisories blanket much of southern Ontario, and we're still seeing blizzard warnings for communities like Barrie, Parry Sound, Stratford, newly added in that. You've seen blizzard-like conditions in some of those areas before, but to have sustained blizzard warnings for much of the day, it's pretty rare. We're still seeing wind gusts over 100 kilometers an hour in some places, still seeing gusts over 80 in the downtown core, and over the last 24 hours, that has been the story consistently, nearly 130 kilometers an hour in some places. So these are certainly damaging winds. You definitely want to be looking up, not at your phone when you're crossing the streets. Blowing snow, whiteout conditions still possible into the Monday morning commute when we return. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this one band of snow that we're concerned about that could pose extra problematic for the 400 and for those communities north and east of the GTA. That one we're coming up.
Okay, key information. We'll see you in a few. Thanks, Sophia. Students in Ottawa are expressing frustration after learning the O-Train's Trillium line will be shut down at least 1 year longer than anticipated. It's part of the expansion of the city's light rail network.
I think OC has let us down a lot, to be honest. There's been a lot of construction going on downtown. There's the O-Train that was promised to us for a long time. I've never seen it.
I was always looking at the convenience of transportation, and knowing that that's not going to be an opportunity for a while, it makes me really upset.
Originally, the Trillium line was going to be taken offline for 16 months from May 2020 to September 2021. Now, the shutdown will last until at least September 2022. The O-Train provides service to Carleton University from transit stations at Bayview in LeBreton Flats and Greenboro in South Keys. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh met voters in a local market in the Greater Vancouver area today. As the by-election in Burnaby South draws closer, it comes with Singh facing doubts within the party about his leadership. We'll have the details after the break. Voters in a Vancouver area riding decide tomorrow if NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will have a seat in the House of Commons. The by-election in Burnaby South is expected to be close, and it comes with Singh facing doubts within the party about his own leadership. CBC's Briar Stewart takes a look at Burnaby South and the campaign to win it.
How's it going, everybody?
It was the final pitch to the lunchtime crowd as NDP leader Jagmeet Singh strolled through an Asian mall in Burnaby South.
You speak Mandarin or Cantonese? And we want to make sure that we can communicate with people in the languages that they're most comfortable in. So we've got a great team of folks that speak all sorts of different languages.
And that's particularly important given the makeup of this community. The riding of Burnaby South is incredibly diverse. More than half of those who live here were born outside of Canada, and about a third either speak Mandarin or Cantonese as their first language. While the area's diversity is celebrated, trying to make race an election issue was not. In January, the Liberal candidate, Karen Wang, was forced to step aside after singling out Singh's ethnicity and urging people to vote for her because she was the only Chinese candidate. Longtime Burnaby resident and four-term provincial MLA Richard Lee stepped in.
Hi, how are you?
As the new Liberal candidate.
A very positive campaign. I look forward to have a positive result tomorrow.
There are 6 candidates in the field. However, this is largely seen as a two-way race between the NDP and the Liberals. The New Democrats won the riding in 2015, but only by about 550 votes.
There's a lot of sort of newer immigrants there.
Sanjay Jaram teaches political science and predicts that for a by-election, the voter turnout could be quite high.
I suspect that it'll either stay close or we might actually see Jagmeet Singh pull away with a comfortable victory. Why I say that is because I think the amount of effort and ground game that the NDP has put into this riding, if it doesn't pay off, it's a real problem for the party.
And they will find out tomorrow night after the polls close at 7 p.m. local. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Burnaby.
And voters in Ontario will also head to the polls in the York Simcoe by-election. Tune into CBC News Network tomorrow for special coverage of all the voting. Our coverage begins tomorrow morning with Heather Hiscox live in the Outremont riding. In the afternoon, the Nationals' Ian Hadamansing will have live coverage from the Burnaby South riding. You can also join Vashi Kapelos and the Power and Politics team for a special edition of the show at 2 p.m. Eastern on top of the regular 5 p.m. edition. And of course, be sure to watch The National at 9 p.m. Eastern as the numbers start to come in. And you can catch that at cbcnews.ca and on our YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope feeds. As he closed out a landmark summit on preventing clergy sex abuse, Pope Francis vowed to crack down on child abusers and stop the cover-ups. But he did not deliver plans to hold bishops accountable. So with the Vatican offering little more than a guidebook for Catholic clerics worldwide, survivors of sexual abuse are feeling let down. Again, Thomas Degler reports.
Sunday at the Vatican, when crowds flock to hear the Pope address pressing issues of the world. None quite as awkward as the crisis of sexual abuse by the supposed moral authorities. We want all aspects and places of the church to always be completely safe for minors, Francis said. Sounds obvious, sure, but notice the tears of this abuse survivor who was hoping for an apology. And consider, it took an unprecedented global summit for Catholic leaders to even get this serious.
How is the church going to get its own house in order? I honestly don't think there is any blinding new clear answer to that question.
As senior clerics return home, they'll be given clearer guidelines for transparency when abuse allegations arise. Hardly the wind of change survivors had hoped for.
We made the needle move just a tad.
Evelyn Korkmaz is getting impatient. She suffered abuse at a Catholic-run residential school in Ontario, and that was 50 years ago.
Now that they know we are being heard all over the world, now they decide, okay, we're going to try to do something.
Survivors came from afar and made plenty of noise for anyone willing to listen.
We are walking excuse me.
Though authorities wouldn't let the people march toward the Vatican, and the Pope wouldn't see them in person.
They covered it up over the
decades, and they know it, and they know that we know it, and that's the reason why they are resisting change.
Behind closed doors, church leaders heard pre-recorded testimony. Survivors themselves weren't allowed in. And the Pope's point man on abuse inquiries acknowledges maybe bishops didn't hear enough voices.
So the experience here may have been played differently, but the more important thing for a church leader is to meet victims where he is, where he's going to be a steward.
Here at the Vatican today, the Pope called for an all-out battle against child abuse, but another senior cleric made it sound a lot more complicated. The church, he said, is like a big ship. It takes a long time to turn around. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Vatican City.
For the third straight day, Algeria's capital saw protests demanding the president step down. The protesters oppose plans for the president to seek a fifth five-year term in this April's election. Abdelaziz Bouteflika suffered a stroke in 2013, and he's been seen in public only a few times since. Critics say there is no evidence that he is fit to govern and believe power now lies with his advisors. And the protesters' demands were echoed in a demonstration in Montreal. About 200 people gathered at the Algerian consulate registering their opposition to a fifth presidential term and calling for an end to the current administration. It may be the tipping point for the regime of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. This weekend, violent clashes there left at least 3 people dead and hundreds injured. The reason for the bloodshed? Maduro ordered his military to block humanitarian aid from entering the country. Food and medical supplies meant for his own people. Lindsay Duncombe reports on the outcry that's created.
This will almost certainly provoke a response. Humanitarian aid torched before it could reach Venezuela's desperately hungry and sick. It's not entirely clear who set the trucks on fire, but the Maduro government's violent refusal to let American aid across the Colombian border escalates the tension here. If it's possible for any country to intervene, then intervene, she says. But we need to get this devil out of power. Arriving in Colombia today, Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido called the burning of humanitarian aid an unprecedented crime. He will meet tomorrow with the Lima group of regional leaders and the U.S. Vice President. American officials say Mike Pence will announce concrete action on Venezuela.
A meeting of the Lima group.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hinted at what that might be today.
There's more sanctions to be had. There's more humanitarian assistance, I think, that we can provide.
Neighboring countries are on board. The Colombian president visited his country's border with Venezuela, tweeting the leaders will discuss how to tighten the diplomatic siege. The big question, though, is will the United States go further than that and take military action? The president hasn't ruled it out.
We seek a peaceful transition of power, but all options are open.
Critics of Donald Trump say that language escalates the crisis. Maduro, who has the support of China and Russia, sees his opposition as an American-led coup, and military leaders appear to back him. But not all troops are on side. Around 60 soldiers made emotional defections at the Colombian border, some saying they did it for their families and the Venezuelan people. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Gusty winds, blowing snow. Will that rough weather we saw today continue? Your long-range weather forecast is coming up. That blast of winter hitting southern Ontario was also forcing police to shut down several provincial highways and transit in Timmins. The city canceled public transit service due to the extreme weather from the storm. OPP have also closed traffic on the highways in the area because of dangerous driving conditions. Well, shovels are always a hot commodity during the winter season, but as residents in Sudbury prepare for another winter storm, some stores are shovel-less.
We unload them, get them on the shelves within 4 to 5 hours, and they're usually sold out by the end of our Monday when the truck arrives. So 4 to 5 hours and our entire order is gone.
The shelves at local home improvement stores are sitting empty as many homeowners have been scrambling to get their hands on this product. But it isn't just for their driveways or sidewalks. Some residents are trying to get shovels so they can remove the heavy amounts of snow from their rooftops. However, those who are still looking for a shovel may be in luck. Hardware stores are expecting a new shipment tomorrow. Well, let's take a look at what we should be expecting in the weather, whether we're still going to need our shovels here in the south. Sophia, what's the word?
And we may even need them midweek this week for a potential snowmaker coming our way. How very Canadian, eh? Shovel-less stores. Current look at wind gusts. Still seeing very damaging winds in the Niagara region, nearly 90 kilometers an hour in the downtown core as well. A little bit less if you zoom in on the GTA and we look kind of west and north of the city of Toronto. When do these damaging winds ease is the question, though. Right into Monday afternoon, even into potentially the Monday evening commute. They're still gusting 60, 70 kilometers an hour before finally tapering off. It's the Monday morning commute we got to talk about because it's the winds that are the driving force behind moving around all the precip that we saw earlier today. The rain, the snow, and there's a few bands of snow squalls that will really lock in coming off the Georgian and the Huron shores. If you're coming north or south on that 400 during the Monday morning commute, even for the communities like Newmarket, Orangeville, Vaughan, you could see accumulating snow blowing around, whiteout conditions still possible. Everybody in southern Ontario could see a little bit of blowing snow and some flurries though. Earlier in the show, you saw the video of the ice shove, the big chunks of ice that were coming over the Fort Erie, Lake Erie shorelines. Still seeing really dangerous wave heights that could continue into the overnight and into much of Monday morning. Stay away from any exposed shorelines, fast moving and dangerous frozen water, certainly problematic. We watched the temperatures drop steadily throughout the day. Today, things got icy. It's going to be a sign of things to come. Into the overnight and into much of Monday, cool wraparound winds in behind this big Texas low pressure system. We stay below seasonal really for much of the work week. The potential of more snow comes midweek, folks. Shovels, go to the stores now.
And boots, for sure.
And boots, winter coats, all the fun stuff.
You got it. Thanks, Sophia.
You're welcome.
A proud moment tonight for Torontonian Domi Shi. The director of the animated short film Bao is officially an Oscar winner.
To all of the nerdy girls out there who hide behind their sketchbooks, don't be afraid to tell your stories to the world.
Pixar's Bao is about a dumpling that symbolizes the grown-up child of an empty nester. The 8-minute film pays homage to Chinese culture, aging parents, and Xi's hometown of Toronto. She included several nods to the city right throughout that piece. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night, everyone.